So in F&B, especially when it comes to wine production and culinary, there's a high degree of training, just as in any other industry, and we won't be able to do that, and it impacts, and then you have to cap wages, and you can't hire more, and maybe you have to lay people off and take on that role yourself as the employer to pick up that slack and just keep enough money to keep the lights on.
The Small Business Rundown is the official podcast of the National Federation of Independent Business, the member-driven voice of small business. NFIB and our members advocate to keep America's small businesses strong and independent in Washington, D.C., all 50 states, and the nation's courts.
Welcome to the Small Business Rundown, a bi-weekly podcast with information on independent businesses' victories and challenges in Washington, D.C. and state capitals. I'm Adam Temple, NFIB Senior Vice President of Advocacy. This week, we're recording this episode at NFIB's Small Business Deduction Summit, and our guests today will be a few of the small business owners who came to D.C. for the summit. While they're here, their agenda includes meeting with members of Congress on Capitol Hill to discuss the urgent need for Congress to make the 20% small business tax deduction permanent. This must be done before the deduction goes away at the end of the year and leaves more than 30 million American small business owners with a massive tax hike. Joining me to discuss the critical issue is Angela Zuba, owner of Water's Edge Winery and Bistro, Tim Boeve, owner of Hillman Automation, and co-owners of American Grit Electric, Derrick Roberts and James Tyson. Also, Jeff Brabant, NFIB Vice President of Federal Government Relations, is joining us. And I want to thank you all for taking the time to sit down with us.
Thank you so much for having us here today.
Thank you, Adam. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us.
Well, thank you all. Why don't we start with you, Derrick and James? Can you just tell us a little bit more about your business?
We opened our business in 2018, both originally from Washington State. He started a business in the home building side and quickly fell into a position where the electrical made sense. So I got a phone call on a Monday night and found myself on a plane Tuesday morning flying from Seattle to OKC. Flew back and forth for 9 months, and when COVID happened, I drug my family from Washington to Oklahoma, and we've been hitting the ground running since.
Excellent. Anything you want to add to that from your experience?
It's been a whirlwind experience. We've had the pleasure of giving this 20% tax deduction to grow our business twofold year after year after year. It's been a big asset to us.
Tim, how about you?
I own Hillman Automation and Precision Dispense Technologies in Zeeland, Michigan. We have approximately 22 employees, and so we're in the automation world where we work with robotics and also work with different customers regarding their processes to help them automate or semi-automate.
Angela, can you tell us a little bit about your business?
Absolutely. So I own Water's Edge Winery and Bistro. We are in Kalispell, Montana, and we are an urban micro winery. And we specialize in bringing remarkable experiences to our guests through the wonderful world of food and wine. We opened in the delightful time period of August 2020. And so we have been forging a path for our employees and our guests ever since.
Excellent. So, Tim, we heard a little bit from Derrick about what the 20% small business tax deduction has done for their business. What about you? How's that affected your business?
Back in 2019, 2020 timeframe, we were able to purchase 2 Haas VF2s, which are numerical controlled machines, CNC machines. With that, we were also able to add 2 employees, and one would be a Bachelor of Science degree individual who programmed the machines, but then also an apprentice. And so that not only helped us with capital equipment, but it also helps us with benefits for employees and such.
Awesome. Angela, you mentioned the opening at what would be characterized by me as a really challenging time. What has the small business deduction meant for your business?
So because we opened right at the peak of COVID, and as many people know, working in food and beverage, margins are very slim to begin with. So this deduction enabled us to actually keep our doors open as a startup and allowed us to get our name out there and spend more money on marketing than we would have been able to, and just keep our doors open.
So that's what it's done for your businesses. You talked about being able to twofold operations. For either of you, if it goes away, what do you think the impact will be on your business, Derrick or James?
Our employees and customers would have to absorb a lot of cost. Currently, with this deduction, we're able to provide all of the tools and licensing and travel expenses for our employees to do the job. If this were to be taken away, the ability for us to make their quality of life the way that it is would vanish. Our ability to expand the business and satisfy some of these rural communities in our area would vanish.
Anything to add there?
Yeah, well, I mean, over the last several years, we've been able to continually grow the business, and through that, it's through reinvestment back in the business. So, fun fact, for 2023's taxes, with the 20% tax deduction, it saved us just over $24,000. And because of our reinvestment into the business, we didn't have that money in the bank at the time. So without this tax deduction, we would have had to close our doors.
Angela, what about you? If it goes away, how's that going to impact your winery and bistro?
Well, it will stop us from being able to expand. We have a high demand for corporate catering in our area, and we are hoping to be able to bring on 2 more full-time employees, which is going to benefit the community, as well as bring on mobile catering and mobile wine bar services. And if that deduction goes away, we won't be able to do that. But in addition, what we do is considered an affordable luxury. And many people take that luxury as their only way of celebrating their anniversaries or their birthdays. And if we have to pass that cost on to the consumer, they won't be able to afford it, and therefore we won't be able to exist. So for a business like ours, it could essentially cripple us.
And it's interesting you bring that up, the customers that you have. We've heard from others where sometimes their customers are businesses themselves. And if the deduction goes away, not only will it affect their ability to operate and grow, but their ability to purchase from yours. Is that something that you're worried about?
Yes, because a lot of our contracts are with other small businesses, and we provide the food and beverage for their training sessions. So training sessions, as we all know, are not always that fun. And so to give them a little bit of enjoyment with the food and beverage, that helps their business as well. And then as well, if we're purchasing new equipment, new cars, new trucks, new trailers, those are coming from small businesses in our area as well, and that just will cease to exist.
That's a really good point. Tim, what does the future look like for you if this thing goes away?
If it goes away, we would really like to add an additional CNC machine, actually, and also add another employee along those lines. In addition to that, employee benefits are very, very important, whether it be summer outings, and that kind of thing. It all costs money, and it's above and beyond the insurance premiums that you're paying. And so you end up looking at all those things that unfortunately hurt the employee.
What other employee impacts, I'd be curious just from anybody, do you see specifically on the employees if the deduction's allowed to expire?
Training. So in F&B, especially when it comes to wine production and culinary, there's a high degree of training, just as in any other industry, and we won't be able to do that, and it impacts. And then you have to cap wages, and you can't hire more, and maybe you have to lay people off and take on that role yourself as the employer to pick up that slack and just keep enough money to keep the lights on.
And that's a nice segue to the electricity business. What the impact on employees and training, I would imagine, would be significant.
Absolutely. Training would unfortunately be one of the first things that have to go, because I can do the job for my customers based off of installation. I don't have to have trained electricians to please most of my customers, but to offer the community the ability to have usable electricity. I, as a privately owned electrical contractor, have an internal training program where I'm spending $5,000 to $15,000 a year on a curriculum. And then me, the owner of the company, I'm taking my time 3 days a week to give these guys an hour, where most of the time they'd have to go to a vocational or tech school to get this asset. So it's career advancement for them, as well as a cultural development within the company itself.
And another trickle-down effect that I think most people don't see right out the gate, not only in our industry, but I'm sure everybody's industry here, is, if we get that 20% tax hike, if this doesn't get renewed or made permanent, ultimately that cost gets passed on to our consumer base. And us in the electrical market, that goes directly to other small business owners and to homeowners. We do a lot of new construction homes, and if we've got to up our prices to keep up with the demands of the market because we lost this 20% tax deduction, that goes directly towards the cost of a home sale. And we're already dealing with a home crisis in this country, so I think it's a no-brainer for Congress to enact and make this permanent. You can't talk out of one side of your mouth and say, hey, we want lower house costs, but then on the other side, give the small business owners a 20% tax hike.
That's a great point. And before we continue, a quick ad break.
Anything your small business creates or builds could be copied by someone else, so legally protecting your intellectual property, or IP, provides a competitive advantage and ensures others don't profit from your hard work and financial investments. Watch NFIB's latest webinar with IP expert, attorney, and Professor Stephen Tepp of RightsClick for guidance on safeguarding your great idea, service, or product. Watch the webinar on demand at nfib.com/webinars.
Welcome back to the Small Business Rundown. Jeff, can you tell us a bit about this NFIB member event that's taking place on Capitol Hill this week?
Sure. This is a huge deal for NFIB. Members of Congress hear from NFIB's lobbyists in D.C., your advocates all the time. But when they hear directly from small business owners, from their communities, it makes a huge difference. So we have about 30 small business owners in town telling their stories directly to members of Congress. And the best thing about that is when our members come in to talk to members of Congress, they can say, hey, I operate my small business in this town, and the member of Congress could instantly remember, oh, I know that. My dry cleaner's right down the road. I know exactly what you're talking about. I know the Little League you're sponsoring, and it makes a big difference to members of Congress to really not only look at the numbers we give them when we do our economic studies about how the small business deduction is important for the small business economy, but then having the story to put with the numbers to paint a complete picture.
Okay. Angela, I'll start with you. I'll ask the same question, all four of you. But small business owners, one of the most prized resources is time, right? And you're taking time to be here. What made you decide to come to this week?
The biggest thing that made me want to come here this week was to be able to network with other business owners from around the country and find out what their stories were and their challenges, and then also to be able to share not only my story, but stories from my colleagues in our own hometown with Congress, and to just really reiterate the importance of keeping the backbone of the American economy going. It, for me, was really about the competitive structure. Big business have leverage over small business inherently because they have better buying power, bigger resources, more clout in the government. So for it to be a level playing field for us was really, really important.
Yeah, and you've met with a couple members of Congress today already, right?
I have met with several, yes.
Anything stand out from your meetings?
Well, one of the things that really stood out for me was that I'm seeing a shift in this new government of congressmen and senators who actually have real life business experience. And I think that that's critical because they understand what we're going through and the challenges that the laws that they make happen do impact small businesses. And if you haven't operated a business before, you don't necessarily understand that. And so that was something that was really, really great to experience.
Yeah, they've signed the front side of the check, not just the back. Tim, same question for you. What prompted you to come this week and what stood out from your meetings?
Well, obviously there's a transition going on within the country, and there's a lot of excitement in West Michigan regarding the new administration. I guess I wanted to come and see firsthand if that same excitement and anticipation was prevalent in Washington, D.C. as well. But also, small business is the backbone of the country. Yeah. And I think a lot of people have forgotten that. And it's unfortunate. And so it's been a long process building the company. And so I felt it very important to come and share my story.
I'd love to hear from you guys. Same. We'll start with James because the microphone's closest to you.
Why we came here is to protect the business. We feel that the tax is one of the most important things that we can run into sitting on this side of the desk. Going from a field employee to now a business owner, it's very important to protect my men and women and to get out here and put a face in front of these politicians and let them connect to the reality of the situation. Most of them had been business owners to a degree at some point and have spent some time away from the matter. So to give them the faces and the business names, like you're saying, local to their community, and make sure that we're doing everything that we can to represent people from the quiet rural area of Oklahoma.
Jeff, what are your expectations for the legislation now that it's been reintroduced and we've had folks in town talking to their members of Congress about it?
The legislation has a lot of support. It has bipartisan support in the House, and we are up to a record number of co-sponsors in the Senate. And what a co-sponsor is a senator signs his name to the bill and says, I support this bill, and puts their name out there publicly. So in terms of the bill moving, I wouldn't anticipate, let's say we're going to get a vote on this tomorrow. This is probably going to be part of a bigger package. You're probably hearing about this budget reconciliation they're talking about in the House, where there's going to be a big tax bill at some point this year. We are anticipating a big tax bill, and we like to think this is going to be part of it, and it's our job to go up to the Hill this week to make sure that this this is part of it.
And what do events like this, what kind of impact do they have as far as the likelihood of a bill like this moving forward, getting more co-sponsors, that sort of thing?
It makes it much more likely to move forward because when members of Congress hear your stories, they know exactly how important this is. This is no longer theoretical. This is no longer numbers on a piece of paper. When they're putting together a tax bill and they're thinking about, all right, what makes it in, what makes it out, and they can put a picture in their head. Oh, last week, I just talked to James and he was telling me about his company and how it supported the community. And this is something that's a staple of my community, so it needs to be in the bill.
Pop quiz, if I could, for everybody. Angela, have you always been a small business owner? If you've not, what did you do before you decided to go down this route?
Before I was a small business owner, I actually worked for big business. I was a CEO of a large corporation, and my job there was to help other small businesses grow. And so I got to see many different facets of the economy, and then decided that I wanted to turn that knowledge and contribute it into something of my own.
That's outstanding. Tim, how about you?
I've been associated with special machinery ever since I graduated from college. In 2008, I joined Hillman Automation. And so in 2016, I became 50/50 owner. And then 2018, I got the opportunity to buy the business. And so I've always been involved with special machinery. I love it. I think it's a great opportunity for young people coming into the world.
Yeah, absolutely. How about you guys?
So no, I haven't always been a small business owner. I actually started in the electrical industry in 2006 and briefly got out of it to become a grunt in the United States Army after the 2008 housing crisis. After my career was over in the military, I came back, got back into the electrical industry while going to college full time. And then as soon as I had the opportunity to rectify a lot of the problems that I had as a field employee, by taking the step to become a small business owner, I jumped on it.
How about you, James?
I have only worked for small businesses. I was in the Army for 5 months, so that was the only exposure I had to large business. So I only know this way. I've only gotten to experience direct ownership struggles, seeing the ownership and management work one-on-one, and trying to build something like that was an aspiration of mine from the teenage years.
And clearly family support, you ended up getting them to move from one state to another.
I brought my entire family here. Grandparents, aunt and uncles, they all followed me.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's been a good discussion. Before we go, is there anything else you guys would like to add?
One thing that I would like to add that this tax provision has enabled us to do in the past few years is we think very highly of corporate social responsibility to our community, and we support local nonprofits such as women's domestic violence shelters and mental health objectives. In the last 4 years, we've been able to donate to our local community, and if this goes away, that's going to be significantly reduced. And in our area in Montana, there is very little government support for mental health resources, and so they rely on small businesses to help them. And I think the majority of our businesses in Kalispell are small, and a lot of those support networks are going to go away.
Tim, how about you? Anything else to add before we go?
Yeah, there's another bill out there, legislation, that Section 174, the R&D Credit and Family Act. It's very important to us in the business that we're in to do what we do. Everything is special. Everything is research and development. And to not support research and development for the companies such as ours and many others like us is foolish. So please keep in mind the Section 174. It's been a political football. It's been passed down since 2022 and just keeps getting kicked down the field.
James, Derrick, anything before we go?
I just want to say thank you to NFIB for the opportunity to be here and to be a voice for the small business community and to hopefully have an impact. It's something that, I've always dreamed of, not only being able to be a voice and have an impact in our area of business, but for small businesses across the country. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you, Derrick. Thank you all for taking the time to be here. It's not hopefully making an impact, it's definitely making an impact. So we really appreciate you taking the time to come this week.
Of course.
Thank you.
for having us.
Thank you.
NFIB members from across the nation, including those that joined us today, have driven home this message to Congress by sending personalized emails to their lawmakers. Listeners can do the same to help reinforce these small business owners' work by sending your own personalized story on issues impacting your small business. We'll put a link into how to do that in today's show notes. And now I want to thank you, the listeners, for joining us on today's Small Business Rundown. We'll be back every 2 weeks bringing you news and analysis from Washington, D.C. and state capitals so that you, whether you're a business owner or a supporter of one, can continue to blaze a trail.
The Small Business Rundown is brought to you by NFIB, the voice of small business. You can find us at nfib.com and on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.